Great.
Hey, Kiko.
Hi, welcome to all of you. My name is Akiko Fujita. I am a correspondent with CNBC. I usually cover tech based out of Singapore. And I'm really excited about this discussion here because Kavin and I first met back at the RISE conference last year, and we've sort of followed their journey. For many of you who may not be familiar, of course, Hike, one of the leading messaging apps in India with more than 100 million users. And yes, they are a unicorn, valued at $1.4 billion with big backing from Tencent as well as SoftBank. So Kavin, we talk often about your strategy right now and moving beyond the messaging space, but let's start from the beginning because this was back in 2012.
Yeah.
And you look at India now, what mobile penetration is, roughly 30%, a little over 30%. Mm-hmm. That's not where it was back in 2012. What gave you the idea at the time to get into the messaging space? Why launch then?
Yeah, I moved back to India in 2011, and I was already building some stuff back in the UK when I was studying there, and it became very clear to me that, two 20-year-olds could pay $100 to Apple, get access to the software development kit, and start building out their dreams. And that was a very powerful thought. No funding, no supervision, no nothing. You could just go build what you thought was right for the world. And I moved back to India because I was home. It became so clear to me that what we were seeing in the UK and the US, this rise of these supercomputers in your pocket, the smartphones and fast data, was going to come to India at eventually 1.2 billion people. The difference being that there's 1 billion people in this country coming online for the first time in their lives on a mobile device, something we've not seen before globally. And I was in a market in Connaught Place in Delhi where I was eating some street food and I was carrying an iPhone 4S in my pocket and I was connected to mails, the internet for the last 15 years of my life. And there was this person opposite me who had a Nokia 1100 feature phone with a torchlight, which was very popular at the time, that had no clue what the internet actually even was. And the first thought that came to my mind was, how would these guys come online? I had a Packet Bell PC, a dial-up modem, Netscape, Yahoo. They would have none of that stuff. And we thought something cheap, something natural, something they understood would be the way they came online, and communication and messaging would play a role in some form or fashion. That's where it started.
So at the time, WhatsApp was already in the market, correct?
Yeah, the market was very early. Very few people had smartphones. Even fewer people had data. You had eBuddy, XMS messaging, Nimbus, WhatsApp. We had a bunch of people then. Yeah.
So what was your thinking behind, as you build out this app, to try and be the local leader in this space when you already have a big name like WhatsApp in the market?
Yeah, we didn't think, we were pretty naive and foolish back then. And I think that worked out in our favor because we just jumped in because we saw a bunch of problems to be solved that were very local to the market. For example, we launched Hike with something called Hike to SMS, which would let you communicate with everybody despite them not having a smartphone or data. And that was a big hit very early on. And every 6 months after 2012, the market shifted very fast. We went from a handful of smartphones to today you have 300 million plus smartphones in the country that have somewhat access to data. And we just evolved the app from a simple messaging app to a rich messaging app to a social messaging app to now a platform, which was the goal eventually 4 or 5 years back. Yeah.
So what would you say when you kind of look at your journey over the last 5 years in terms of your average Hike user? How has that evolved from 2012 to now?
I think when you start off building a service, you kind of throw it out there and see what sticks. And very quickly, I think in a year, we realized that we were attracting a younger population to the application. So it became very clear to us in year 2 that 15 to 24 was the core segment, inside of which I think 18 to 21 is where we sort of focus, college goers. And then we started focusing heavily on college goers and solving problems for them around privacy, offline expression, and so on. But the app has evolved tremendously. We're now on 5.0 that we launched 2 weeks back. So this is the 5th rendition of Hike. And as I mentioned, we've gone from a simple messaging app to a rich messaging app with stickers to having a timeline to a platform, and now we've added payments. So we are still on that journey of building Hike as a platform, and I think it's very early days still.
And along with Hike's evolution, of course, we have seen infrastructure improve in India. We've seen more and more smartphone users. How have you seen the behavior there change along with the acceleration of that digital, digital space?
It's changed in step jumps, and we've seen this happen multiple times, with the most recent one being 4G. 4G came in a big way last year. About, I think, 80 to 100 million people actually have actively 4G in the country. It's a large population, but very small in the bigger realm of things. Video consumption has gone up, media consumption has gone up. People can actually have, real video calling conversations on the platform. So we've seen, the underlying technology improve. That's had a massive impact on the number of apps people have on their phones, and also their time spent going up. For example, in Hike itself, we've gone from 18 minutes per day to 24 minutes per day in the last 9 months itself. And we can see that still continue to grow because infrastructure is getting better. But there's still a lot of problems in the country.
I always think it's interesting, when you travel around the world, I mean, obviously messaging is now all over, but how people utilize it. Like, for example, in the US, people were so used to text messaging before that whether it's Facebook Messenger or, WhatsApp is not even as widely used as it is in Asia. And then you have apps like Line over in Japan, and then, of course, WeChat,
Yep.
where users do everything on there. What would you say is unique to the Indian market? I mean, if somebody's coming in and says, okay, so what makes the Indian user unique? How are they different from perhaps the way users would use a messaging app in China?
That's a loaded question. I think they start off with India is a country of 20 countries. We have so much diversity between the north, south, and the west and the east. Culturally, it's very different. Languages are a massive barrier. But more importantly, the market is predominantly mobile first. There's 1 billion people still coming online for the first time in their lives on a mobile device onto the internet. That changes things. We're not aware of what the internet is. We're not aware of what MBs and GBs are. We've not seen the PC, unlike China that had a very large, thriving PC/cyber cafe culture. And as a result of which, for most people in the country, and we divide India into 3 parts, the top of the top pyramid, which is people who aspire to be like the West, the middle India, and then the bottom India. So most of India has not seen the internet before. And so the internet can be, for a large part of these people, a very complicated place. You buy a phone from here, you get a SIM card from here, you buy prepaid data every week or 2 weeks from here, you get apps from there, your phone can't handle too many applications, your data runs out because you don't know how much 100 MB is. It's a wild, wild west. So someone has to go and solve this, and we really believe that through messaging, you can change this because messaging becomes the entry point that's understood. And can you tack on more services on top of messaging, and like we do, news, cricket scores, now payments, inside the application to make the internet a simple place to consume services.
You talk about payments. I mean, that's been a big step for Hike. You announced last month that you're getting into the payment space as well. When we were talking yesterday, you said that's kind of the next phase here because that's been the most difficult part. You've laid the payments foundation now. Now you can begin building on the app even more. What's going to be guiding your decision here as you look to perhaps add more shopping or I mean, there's so many ways the app can evolve from here. What's the thought process there?
We want to do things slightly differently on this front. We've started off with a foundation that's very strong. You can send money back and forth. We allow people to recharge and top up their phones inside Hike itself, so you don't need one more app to go do that. We have something called Blue Packets, which is very inspired by what Tencent's done in China. Because we believe, at our core, we're a social app. So how do we make networks stronger, deeper, more meaningful? And so payments for us, for the first leg, is social. India is a very festive country. They celebrate everything and everybody. I mean, we celebrate everything and everybody. We celebrate the sister, the brother, we have Holi, we have Diwali. And a lot of gifts and money gets exchanged during these periods. And I'm a big believer that technology companies do really well when they take offline behavior that exists at scale and bring it online and make it better, faster, simpler, and cheaper. And we believe with Blue Packets we can go do that to start off with in payments. Now that we have this, the question is, what else can you build on top? And today we already have microservices inside Hike that deliver news, live cricket scores, things around fitness, recharge. And it's only a matter of time in the next 6 to 12 months that we bring more microservices that are transacting in nature on the platform. However, we do not want to do it in a very simple manner. We want to sort of, again, look at offline behavior and how people transact offline and somehow bring that behavior online. A small example is the mall culture in India amongst the youth is very large. And mall culture is always social. You're always with 3, 4 of your friends. So how do you buy movie tickets with 3, 4 friends? How do you go to restaurants with 3, 4 friends? How do you bring that behavior inside the application? That's where most of our focus is for the next 12 months in bringing these services onto the platform.
So is the idea here to partner with more companies? Is it to acquire them? I mean, what's the strategy as you build it out?
We're fortunate enough to be in a country where we have a strong player in each vertical. So we have the guys in the taxi space, and the restaurant space, and the ticketing space, and so on. And we're looking forward to having these discussions with these partners because the active base in Hike is quite large. And India has a very large app uninstall problem because the smartphones are very cheap. So giving access to a lot of these companies to distribution is a very powerful thing for them. And now we're talking to them at a very early stage to figure out how can we make their experiences far more social inside Hike itself. That'll take some trial and error. We're not against acquiring companies, but we want to focus on what we're strong at. We do social really well. We don't do taxis really well. We don't do food really well. We want to partner in areas and potentially even acquire in areas where it's not our DNA.
You were talking about when you started in 2012 how fragmented things were, where you buy the smartphone from one place, you get the SIM card from somewhere else, and it's kind of piecing together that whole experience on mobile. We were talking about this a bit yesterday. I mean, do you think that the push needs to be increasingly more on the software side of things? I mean, could we see perhaps these apps, these companies work more closely with the smartphone makers to already have that installed, like we do see in China, to begin that user experience from the get-go when they get that phone?
I think something more than pre-installs have to be done because the problem is, until recently, the average Indian smartphone consumer had 32 apps on their phone on average. 12 to 15 of those are preloaded. So really they get to install about 12 to 15 apps on their phones. But the ones that are preloaded don't necessarily get used. They're just bloatware sitting on the phones. And it's difficult when I buy a smartphone as a consumer, I have 15 different apps that have 15 different user experiences, that consume data in 15 different ways, that need 15 different sign-ons. So it's a very complicated world. So that's not enough. We have to go one level deeper. I think there's an opportunity to go and collapse this value chain and make the internet very simple, where you can make the internet itself, the MBs and GBs, completely disappear. There's an opportunity to go and do that, and I hope someone comes in and builds that sort of product. So,
let me see if we can look back a bit, because while I know Hike has been in discussions to bring this payments platform that you just launched for years, there's been a lot of attention on digital payments, the digital economy in India since demonetization last year, and that certainly did accelerate the process. This is just another initiative from the Modi government. We've heard about Make in India, Digital India. We've heard about a lot of initiatives, and I wonder if you have seen the effect there. Has there been an impact? How effective do you think this push to make India more digital has been over the last several years?
I think, first of all, I don't think any country globally is even thinking about this, is even doing this. That's the best part about where we are in India right now. Number two is we also have a government who is encouraging and backing and pushing companies to build infrastructure in the country. If you look at the NPCI, they built something called UPI, which is Unified Payments Interface, that lets you do one-click bank-to-bank transfer. One part of Hike's payment solution is actually built on UPI. And if we didn't have UPI, this would have taken us probably another 6 to 9 months. So it's great to see those initiatives inside the country. We saw demonetization happen. During that period, the adoption of payment solutions went up. But in the last couple of months, cash has come back in the system very rapidly. As a result, the adoption has gone downwards. So I think it's early days. It's going to take a lot more to get India onto the digital payments revolution, because it has to be a part of every single point in your life. But I think it's people always overestimate what happens in the next year, 2 years, and they always underestimate what happens in 5 years. I'm a big believer that in 4 or 5 years from now, this country is going to be very different. It's going to be very, very different because the amount of companies pushing this agenda, including us and the government, are very large.
Different how?
We're attacking it from social. We have some people, taking it from the commerce side. We have new kinds of banks being spun up in the country. If you look at payments bank licenses, these are small banking licenses that have been given to new companies. We have telecom operators and startups like Paytm becoming banks themselves. So there's a lot of action happening from different angles to attack the digital currency sort of phenomena. And I have no doubt in 4 to 5 years from now, you'll see this country be very, very different. As we've seen it happen in the last 4.5 years. I mean, think about it, Akiko. 4.5 years ago, we had probably 1 million smartphone users. We have 300 million today. Fast forward, 4 or 5 years, I mean, who knows?
I mean, that's my next question, because this year marks, 5 years since Hike began?
2012.
4.5.
Yeah.
Let's look ahead to the next 5 years. Where's Hike going to be then?
I founded this company on the idea of just being able to build some stuff that would have an impact on people's lives. And, the big question that we had was, how do you bring 1 billion people who are mobile first, who don't know about the internet, online in a very simple way? We want to keep playing that angle, and more importantly, be responsible for a sizable amount of people actually coming online. So if you fast forward 4 to 5 years, I think that there are a lot of things that are going to happen in the ecosystem. Smartphones become cheaper, better, faster. Data becomes cheaper, better, faster. And we're big believers that the app model is broken. And so if you fast forward 4 to 5 years, it's very possible that most of people's time is spent inside a handful of applications where services are very contextually given to them based on what they're doing right now. And we hope to be one of the strong platforms in the country doing that in 4 to 5 years from now.
Is the idea to eventually take this beyond India?
Never say never. There are similar emerging markets globally, mobile-first emerging markets globally. Africa has a couple of countries that are very similar to India. There's Bangladesh, there's Sri Lanka. But India has 1 billion people. We've talked about so many problems. There's a lot of users
to get to.
Yeah, and there's so many problems in the country itself, and I think that we have a long way to go before we solve these problems. But if we do them at scale, I think you can port them fairly easily to other countries.
So you've got more than 100 million users right now. Do you have a target of where you want to be 5 years from now? Where you want to be by the end of the year?
We don't put out target numbers, but our goal is to just drive engagement in the product and make sure we're building a product that people love, and a lot of people love. Hopefully 200, 300, 400 millions of people love, because you have that opportunity in this country. Keep in mind, WeChat and QQ in China both have comfortably over 500 million monthly active users. There's a similar opportunity in India waiting for us.
Great. We'll leave it on that optimistic note. Thank you so much, Kavin.
Thanks a lot, Akiko. Okay.